Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. Today we are diving headfirst into the ultimate archaeological detective story. We're investigating how some of the most thriving, advanced ancient civilizations on Earth were just utterly decimated by catastrophic natural events. And we're not just talking about old myths here. No, we are literally stripping away thousands of years of dirt, volcanic ash, and ocean to look at the hard forensic evidence of history's absolute most terrifying ground zeros. Here is our flight plan for today. We'll start by looking at these ultimate cold cases. Then we'll dive into Thera and the Minoan apocalypse, followed by the terrifying tale of two cities at Vesuvius. After that, we'll explore the slow-motion Maya collapse, how people tried to survive in the aftermath, and finally, we'll look at the sleeping giants right beneath our feet today. Let's get into it. Part 1. The ultimate cold cases. Investigating ancient ground zeros. Moving right along to Part 2, Thera, the Minoan apocalypse, the eruption that literally drowned a civilization. Okay, so for a long time, historians had absolutely no idea what happened to the Minoans. They were Europe's very first advanced civilization, right? Master sailors, incredible architects. But then marine scientists mapping the seafloor made this massive breakthrough right outside the volcanic island of Thera, which you probably know as modern-day Santorini. Down in the dark, they discovered that an ancient cataclysmic eruption around 1600 BC, estimated to be many, many times more powerful than Krakatoa, had created these giant stone ramps under the sea. And these formed when pyroclastic flows, which are basically superheated gas and ash moving way faster than a car on the highway, slammed directly into the ocean. It's just wild to picture. But it wasn't just the initial blast that doomed them. It was the fatal domino effect that followed. A 20-mile-high ash column displaced so much of the sea that it sent towering 30-foot tsunamis crashing into the northern coast of Crete. That completely wiped out their naval fleet, which was the absolute backbone of their trade empire. So now they're weakened, they're economically crippled, and to make matters worse, the ash clouds blocked the sun, causing multi-year crop failures. They just couldn't recover. Within a century, the Mycenaean Greeks swept in and took over. Actually, some scholars even think this exact catastrophe is what sparked the legend of Atlantis, an advanced island civilization just swallowed by the sea. Which brings us to Part 3, Vesuvius, a tale of two cities, Pompeii, Herculaneum, and the infamous 79 AD eruption. You've probably heard of Pompeii, but hearing a primary account of it is truly chilling. Pliny the Younger, a Roman eyewitness, perfectly captured the terrifying exact moment Mount Vesuvius awoke. He described it as a pine tree made of smoke rising into the heavens. I mean, even though it was the middle of the day, the sky above Pompeii turned into this blacker-than-night snowstorm of pumice and ash. Vesuvius erupted with a force equivalent to thousands of atomic bombs, and the tragedy unfolded over an agonizing 24 hours. Because of the way the wind was blowing, the initial debris rained entirely on Pompeii, which was a bustling commercial city of about 12,000 people, burying it slowly. But 12 hours later, that towering explosive column collapsed, sending a superheated surge barreling straight down the mountain into the smaller, wealthier, neighboring resort town of Herculaneum. It wouldn't be until 18 hours after the initial eruption that the fourth and fifth surges finally reached Pompeii. Now, this brings us to a really fascinating forensic mystery. For decades, archaeologists found thousands of those beautifully preserved body molds in Pompeii, but almost none in Herculaneum. For a while, people actually assumed the residents of Herculaneum had simply escaped. But then, archaeologists dug down to the ancient shoreline and found dozens of stone boat chambers just packed with skeletons. The difference came down to sheer geography and heat. The people of Pompeii died largely from collapsing roofs and suffocation over many hours. Their bodies were encased in cooler ash, which froze their final moments in time and left behind those famous flesh molds. But Herculaneum, that was a completely different nightmare. The residents hiding in those boat chambers were hit by a 100-mile-per-hour pyroclastic surge at over 500 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat was so extreme, so unbelievably fast, that it instantly boiled their brains and vaporized their flesh. All right, let's cross the globe for Part 4, the slow-motion Maya collapse, uncovering the lost kingdom of Sakhtsi. Between 800 and 1000 AD, massive Maya cities like Tikal, Copan, and Calakmul, places that held hundreds of thousands of people, were abandoned almost simultaneously. For decades, it was a total mystery. But today, using LiDAR technology, basically lasers shot from airplanes, we can virtually strip away the dense jungle canopy to reveal massive hidden cities like the 60-acre capital of Sakhtsi.
But to understand why these sprawling metropolises were emptied, we have to look a bit deeper than just the spectacular ruins.
See, excavations here rarely show sudden natural destruction. There's no volcanic ash layer. Instead, we see signs of intense, violent social breakdown. We're talking royal monuments that were intentionally broken, faces scratched out, noses knocked off statues. As resources wildly dwindled, trust in the royal dynasties completely evaporated. It was a vicious cycle. Famine triggered brutal warfare between competing city-states. The warfare accelerated the collapse, and eventually the people just walked away, letting the jungle reclaim everything. So, what actually caused that famine? That brings us to part 5, survival in the aftermath, adapting to a changing world. To figure out what drove this collapse, scientists didn't just look at stone temples. They looked deep underwater. They took sediment core samples from lakes and flooded sinkholes called cenotes across the Yucatan. And down in those dark depths, amidst some truly haunting discoveries of skulls and human remains from ritual sacrifices, the environmental truth was just waiting to be found. They discovered artifacts like stingray spines, which Maya priests used for excruciating bloodletting rituals, sitting far below the modern waterline. These are essentially the smoking guns, proving a catastrophic climate shift. Those sediment cores reveal that the region was hit by successive waves of severe, decades-long droughts. During the absolute worst years, rainfall dropped by a staggering 40 to 70%. But here's the thing, the Maya didn't just vanish overnight. They desperately tried to adapt. For a civilization utterly dependent on rain-fed agriculture, they shifted tactics. They altered farming, they performed extreme bloodletting sacrifices to summon rain, and they expanded massive trade networks to survive. It's actually a striking parallel to the Indus Valley civilization. At its peak, the Indus Valley was larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, with over 5 million people in cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. They had advanced drainage and standardized weights. But around 1900 BC, shifting monsoons and the drying up of their massive river systems, likely the legendary Saraswati River, scattered that huge population into small farming villages. In both the Maya and Indus cases, there was no single explosive event, just a terrifying, slow-motion climate catastrophe. Finally, let's look at part 6, the giants beneath us, the breathing landscape of Campi Flegrei. We tend to think of these disasters as ancient history, but just miles from Pompeii lies an entirely different, modern threat. It's a sunken landscape built directly over massive magma chambers that literally act like a giant pair of lungs. This supervolcano, known as Campi Flegrei, fills with magma and lifts the Earth up, then empties and drops it back down. If it were to fully erupt today, it could produce an explosion 10 times more powerful than the blast that wiped out the Minoans. It is a very real, breathing reminder of nature's sheer, unstoppable power. So we look back at the Minoans, the Romans, the Maya, and the Indus Valley, and we marvel at their ruins. We try to solve their mysteries. But with supervolcanoes currently breathing right beneath our own modern cities and global climates rapidly shifting around us, it really begs the question, despite all of our advanced technology, are we actually any more prepared for the wrath of nature than they were? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember,